The great ship Harmony's Edge floated in the darkness between stars. It was a neutral station, built by the Galactic Council thousands of years ago for moments exactly like this one. First contact with a new species was always a delicate matter, and the Council had learned to handle such things with care. Ambassador Vexeri of the Calorie Dominion stood in the greeting chamber, his forearms folded behind his back. His scales shimmered with nervous energy, shifting from deep blue to pale green as he waited. He had performed this duty many times before. New species always followed the same pattern. They arrived confused and frightened. They listened to the Council's terms. They yielded what was asked of them. And then they were welcomed into galactic civilization. It was simple. It was logical. It was the way things had been done for 10,000 years. The doors opened, and the humans walked in. Commander Daniel Hayes was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple uniform, dark blue with silver markings on the shoulders. Beside him walked Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, a younger woman with black hair, pulled back tight. Her eyes moved constantly, studying the room, the guards, the exits. Behind them came a small group of aides and officers, but Vexeri barely noticed them. His attention was fixed on the two leaders. There was something strange about the way they carried themselves. They did not look frightened. They did not look confused. They looked like soldiers walking into a battlefield they had already mapped. "Welcome to Harmony's Edge," Vexeri said through his translator device. "I am Ambassador Vexeri of the Kalari Dominion, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. We have watched your species with great interest. Your development has been remarkable." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you. We're honored to be here. Please, sit." Vexeri gestured to a curved table in the center of the room. "We have much to discuss." The humans sat. Their aides arranged themselves behind them. Maria pulled out a small device and began recording. This was also expected. New species always wanted records of their first contact. "The Galactic Council represents over 200 species," Vexeri began. "We maintain peace, facilitate trade, and protect our members from external threats. Membership in the Council brings many benefits: access to advanced technology, protection from hostile forces, trade relationships with countless worlds." "Sounds good so far," Daniel said. However, Vexeri continued, "Membership also requires certain concessions. This is normal. Every species must yield something to join the greater whole. It is the foundation of galactic cooperation." Maria's fingers stopped moving on her recording device. Daniel's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. "What kind of concessions?" he asked. "The Epsilon Corridor," Vexeri said, projecting a star map above the table. "This hyperspace lane runs through territory you have claimed. It is vital for trade between the inner and outer sectors. The Council requires control of this corridor to ensure safe passage for all member species." And Daniel studied the map for a long moment. The Epsilon Corridor cut directly through the heart of human-controlled space. It connected 3 of their largest colonies to Earth. Giving it up would mean depending on alien goodwill for basic travel and supply routes. "No," Daniel said. Vexeri's scales flickered with confusion. "I apologize. My translator may have malfunctioned. Could you repeat that?" I said no. "We're not giving up the Epsilon Corridor." The chamber fell silent. Vexeri's 4 arms dropped to his sides. He had conducted first contact ceremonies for over 60 years. He had welcomed 17 new species into the Council. Not once, not ever, had a species simply refused the opening offer. "Commander Hayes," Vexeri said slowly, "perhaps you do not understand. This is how integration works. Every species yields something. The Kalori gave up 3 star systems. The Vorthok surrendered their weapons research. The Minri allowed Council oversight of their communications network. Yielding is not defeat. It is cooperation." "We understand perfectly," Maria said, speaking for the first time. "You're asking us to give up control of our own territory in exchange for membership in your club. That's not cooperation. That's tribute." Vexeri. Scales turned a deep red, a sign of frustration among his people. "This is not tribute. This is the standard process. All species must demonstrate their willingness to work within the galactic community. Yielding territory shows trust. It shows commitment. It shows weakness, Daniel replied calmly. Where we come from, you don't give away what you've built just because someone asks nicely. If you want to trade with us, we can talk about trade agreements. If you want to ally with us, we can talk about mutual defense. But we don't surrender territory. Not to enemies. Not to friends. Not to anyone. Vexeri stood up, his confusion turning to genuine alarm. Commander, I must warn you. Species that refuse council membership often find the galaxy to be a hostile place. There are forces out here that would destroy you without a second thought. The Keth Swarm. The Vorthok Hegemony. The Dark Collective. Without council protection, your species would be vulnerable. Daniel stood as well, matching the ambassador's height. We've been vulnerable before. We've faced extinction before, and we're still here. We didn't survive by yielding to threats. We survived by fighting them. This is not a threat, Vexeri insisted. I am trying to help you, then help us without asking for our territory. The two leaders stared at each other across the table. Vexeri searched the human's face for some sign of fear, some hint of doubt. He found nothing but calm determination. I will report this to the council, Vexeri said finally. They will not be pleased. We're not here to please them, Maria said. We're here to establish a relationship between equals. If the council can't handle that, then maybe we don't need the council. The humans left the chamber without another word. Vexeri stood alone in the silence, his scales slowly fading back to their normal blue. He had lived for 300 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed the birth of new civilizations and the death of old ones. But he had never seen anything like this. He returned to the council chambers that evening and delivered his report. The representatives listened in stunned silence. When he finished, High Arbiter Zinthal, the ancient crystalline being who led the council, asked a simple question. Do they not understand that yielding is survival? Vexeri thought about the look in Daniel Hayes' eyes. That absolute certainty, that complete refusal to bend. I believe, Vexeri said slowly, that they understand perfectly. They simply do not accept it. To them, yielding is not survival. It is death. A slow death, perhaps, but death nonetheless. The council debated for hours. They argued about economics and military strategy and diplomatic precedent. But beneath all the arguments, a single question hung in the air, unspoken but impossible to ignore. What do you do with a species that does not know how to yield? None of them had an answer. The Vorthok warships came out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry insects. 40 vessels, each one bristling with weapons, formed a perfect blockade around Nexus Station. Their hulls were painted black, and their engines burned with cold blue fire. They were the most feared military force in the outer sectors, and they had come to teach humanity a lesson. Admiral Patricia Cole stood on the command deck of the station and watched them arrive. She was a small woman with short gray hair and hands that never seemed to stop moving. Behind her, the crew worked in tense silence, running calculations and checking weapon systems. They all knew the numbers. 8 human ships against 40 Vorthok warships. 2,000 defenders against an invasion force of 20,000. The math was not in their favor. Admiral said Lieutenant Commander Samuel Green, her first officer, "We're receiving a transmission from the Vorthok flagship." Put it on screen. The image of High Marshal Grathker appeared before them. He was a massive creature, easily 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and tusks that curved up from his lower jaw. His eyes were small and dark, filled with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Human Commander Grathker rumbled. "I am High Marshal Grathker of the Vorthok Hegemony. You are occupying territory that belongs to us. You have 12 hours to evacuate this station and surrender all mining equipment. If you refuse, we will destroy you." Patricia tilted her head slightly. "I don't recall signing any treaties that gave you this territory." "Treaties are for equals," Grathker replied. "You are not our equals. You are a young species playing games you do not understand. The Council has abandoned you. No one will come to help you. Yield now, and your people may live." Patricia looked at Sam. Sam looked back at her. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. "Hi, Marshal," Patricia said finally. "I'm going to need you to repeat that last part. Yield now, and your people may live." No, the part before that. About nobody coming to help us. Grathker's eyes narrowed with confusion. "The Council has abandoned you. You stand alone." Patricia nodded slowly, as if considering this information carefully. Then she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been told exactly what she wanted to hear. "Good," she said. "Then nobody will complain when we break all your ships." She cut the transmission before Grathkar could respond. The next 12 hours were chaos. Patricia ordered every non-combat personnel into the station's deep shelters. She had the engineering teams tear apart the mining equipment and rebuild it into weapons. Drilling lasers became point defense systems. Cargo drones were loaded with explosives and programmed to fly suicide missions. The station's massive processors were modified to launch chunks of raw asteroid at incoming ships. When the deadline passed, the Vorthok attacked. The first wave came in fast and confident. Grathker expected the humans to break within minutes. He expected panic, surrender, desperate pleas for mercy. What he got instead was a wall of fire that tore his lead ships apart. The mining lasers were not elegant weapons, but they were powerful. They had been designed to cut through solid rock, and they cut through Vorthok armor just as easily. The explosive drones swarmed around the enemy formation, detonating against engines and weapon systems. The asteroid chunks launched at incredible speeds, punched holes through holes like bullets through paper. By the end of the first day, the Vorthok had lost 6 ships. They had not breached the station's shields. Grathker was furious. He ordered a second wave, then a third. Each time, the humans found new ways to hurt him. They used the asteroid field around the station as cover, hiding behind massive rocks and striking from unexpected angles. They sent out teams in small shuttles to board damaged Vorthok ships and steal supplies. They turned everything into a weapon. On the 5th day, a young engineer named Carlos Rivera came to Patricia with an idea. "Admiral," he said, "we can modify the station's gravity generators. If we pulse them at the right frequency, we can destabilize the Vorthok formation." Patricia stared at him. "The gravity generators are keeping us anchored to this asteroid. If we mess with them, we might tear the station apart." Carlos nodded. "Yes, ma'am. But we might also tear their ships apart first." Patricia thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Do it." The gravity pulse hit the Vorthok fleet like an invisible hammer. Ships that had been holding steady formation suddenly found themselves being pulled in different directions. 2 vessels collided. A third spun out of control and crashed into an asteroid. The chaos bought the defenders another 2 days, but the supplies were running low. The ammunition was running out. The crew was exhausted, sleeping in shifts of 3 or 4 hours, when they could manage it at all. Patricia walked through the station every night, checking on her people, offering words of encouragement. She never showed doubt. She never showed fear. On the 10th day, Samuel came to her with the latest numbers. "We have maybe 3 days of food left," he said quietly. "Power reserves are at 40%. Half our weapons are offline. Admiral, we can't hold much longer." Patricia looked out the viewport at the Vorthok fleet. They had lost 11 ships now, but they still outnumbered the defenders badly. She could see shuttles moving between their vessels, preparing for a final assault. "How long until the reinforcements arrive?" she asked. "They're coming at all. Another week at minimum. Maybe 2. Patricia closed her eyes. She thought about surrender. She thought about what it would mean for her people, for the colony, for all of humanity. She thought about the message it would send to the galaxy. Then she opened her eyes and stood up straight. "Then we hold for 2 weeks," she said. "Tell the crew to cut rations in half. Tell engineering to find me more power. And tell the weapons teams to make every shot count." Samuel hesitated. "Admiral, with respect, the math doesn't work. We can't survive 2 weeks against this force. The math never works, Sam. It didn't work at Thermopylae. It didn't work at the Alamo. It didn't work 100 times in human history. when a small group decided to hold against impossible odds. And yet here we are. Still standing? Still fighting? She put her hand on his shoulder. We are not going to yield this station. Not today. Not ever. The Vorthok can throw everything they have at us, and we will keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight with. And when the reinforcements arrive, they're going to find us still here, still holding the line. Samuel took a deep breath. Then he nodded. Yes, ma'am. The siege continued. On the 14th day, the sensors detected new ships emerging from hyperspace. For a terrible moment, everyone on the station thought it was more Vort. Then the identification signals came through. 20 human warships, led by the carrier Defiance. Behind them came a medical frigate, supply ships, and enough firepower to turn the tide. High Marshal Grathker looked at his remaining ships, then at the fresh human fleet, and made the only decision that made sense. He ordered a retreat as the Vorthok disappeared into hyperspace. Patricia Cole sat down in her command chair for the first time in 2 weeks. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but she was smiling. They had not yielded. And because they had not yielded, they had won. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 years. Its walls were carved from the heart of a dead moon, polished until they shone like mirrors. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it, drifting slowly through the artificial atmosphere. Representatives from over 200 species filled the tiered seats, each delegation in its own section, each speaking its own language while translators hummed and chirped in the background. Today, the chamber was in chaos. High Arbiter Zinthal floated at the center of the room, ancient crystals pulsing with frustrated light. The being was old beyond measure, one of the last survivors of a species that had helped found the Council itself. In all those long millennia, Zinthal had never seen a session quite like this one. Order, the Arbiter called out, voice resonating through every translator in the room. I call for order, shouting continued. A delegation of insectoid Keth were clicking their mandibles in rage. The Vorthok representative was pounding his fist against his console. 3 different species were arguing about territorial claims that had nothing to do with the current crisis. Someone had released a cloud of pheromones that was making the Tellurian delegates extremely uncomfortable. Order Zinthal repeated, and this time the crystals flared with blinding intensity. The chamber fell silent.
Thank you, the Arbiter said.
Now, we are here to discuss the human situation. Ambassador Vexeri, please present your updated report. Vexeri rose from the Kalori section. His scales were pale, a sign of exhaustion among his people. He had not slept well since the siege of Nexus Station. The news had disturbed him in ways he could not fully explain. Distinguished representatives, he began. As you know, the Vorthok hegemony recently attempted to force human compliance through military action. They blockaded a human mining colony with a fleet of 40 warships, and they failed, someone called out from the back. There was nervous laughter. Yes, Vexeri said. They failed. The humans held for 14 days against overwhelming force. They converted mining equipment into weapons. They rationed food until they were barely surviving. They fought until reinforcements arrived, and then they drove the Vorthok away. The Vorthok representative stood up. This proves nothing. The humans got lucky. Their reinforcements arrived at the right moment. Given more time, we would have broken them. With respect, Vexeri replied, I do not believe that is true. I have studied the battle records. The humans were prepared to fight to the last soldier. They had no evacuation plans, no surrender protocols. They were simply going to keep fighting until they won, or until they were all dead. The chamber rustled with uncomfortable murmurs. This was not how civilizations behaved. When defeat was inevitable, sensible species negotiated. They yielded. They lived to fight another day. Dying for a mining station made no logical sense. I call Scholar Minra of the Archive Collective to present analysis, Zinthal announced. A small creature scuttled forward from the lower seats. Minra was barely half a meter tall, with 6 legs and a body covered in soft brown fur. Large eyes blinked slowly as the scholar activated a holographic display. I have spent the past 2 cycles studying human history, Minra said in a high, squeaking voice. I have reviewed their wars, their politics, their art, their philosophy. I have analyzed over 10,000 years of recorded civilization, and I have reached a conclusion that I find deeply troubling. The display showed images from Earth's past, soldiers standing against impossible odds, cities burning but refusing to surrender, people marching into certain death for causes they believed in. Humans do not have a concept of yielding, Minra continued. Not in the way we understand it. They have words for surrender, yes. They have lost wars. They have been conquered. But even in defeat, they do not truly yield. They resist. They rebel. They wait for the right moment and then they strike back. This is foolishness, the Tellurian representative said. All species yield when necessary. It is basic survival instinct. That is precisely the point, Minra replied. Human survival instinct works differently. When we face a superior enemy, our instinct tells us to submit, to preserve our lives, to accept a lesser position until circumstances change. When humans face a superior enemy, their instinct tells them to fight harder. The scholar changed the display. Now it showed statistics, graphs, charts filled with data. I analyzed their brain chemistry. Humans produce massive amounts of adrenaline and cortisol when threatened. These hormones do not just prepare them to fight or flee. They create a state of heightened determination. Their bodies are literally designed to become more stubborn under pressure. But surely, Ambassador Vixeri said, they must understand that sometimes yielding is the logical choice. Surely they can see when a battle cannot be won. They can see it, Minra agreed. They simply refuse to accept it. There is a phrase in their primary language that captures this perfectly. They say, "Give me liberty or give me death." This is not poetry. This is not exaggeration. They mean it literally. The chamber was completely silent now. Representatives who had been arguing moments ago were staring at the display with expressions of shock and confusion. I found no equivalent phrase in any other species' language. Minra added quietly, "We do not have the concept because we cannot imagine feeling that way." Zinthal floated forward, ancient crystals dim with contemplation. "Scholar, what do you recommend? How should the council deal with this species?" Minra was quiet for a long moment. The little creature looked around the chamber, at all the powerful beings who had shaped galactic civilization for millennia. "I recommend that we do not try to force them to yield," the scholar said finally, "because I believe that if we push them hard enough, they will destroy themselves trying to destroy us. And they might succeed at both." "You cannot be serious," the Vorthok representative growled. "They are one species. We are 200. They have been in space for barely 2 centuries. We have been here for thousands of years," yes, Minra agreed. "And in those 2 centuries, they have spread to 40 worlds. They have built a military that fought your fleet to a standstill. They have developed technology that rivals our own. Imagine what they will be capable of in another 2 centuries. In 5, in 10, the scholar's large eyes turned to look directly at the Vorthok representative. They are not slowing down. They are not waiting for permission. They are not yielding to anyone. And if we make them our enemy, we will create a problem that our grandchildren's grandchildren will still be fighting." The debate continued for hours after that. Representatives argued about trade agreements and military alliances and diplomatic protocols. But beneath all the words, everyone in that chamber understood the truth. They had encountered something new, something they did not understand, something that did not follow the rules that had governed galactic civilization since before recorded history, and none of them knew what to do about it. When the session finally ended, Ambassador Vexeri found himself walking beside Scholar Minra in the corridors outside the chamber. "Do you really believe they are that dangerous?" Vexeri asked. Minra looked up at the tall Kalori ambassador. Those large eyes seemed to hold a sadness that went beyond words. "I believe," the scholar said slowly, "that they are exactly as dangerous as we make them. If we treat them as partners, they will be the most loyal allies the galaxy has ever known. If we treat them as enemies, they will burn everything down, including themselves, before they let us win." "That is not rational behavior," No, Minra agreed. "It is not, but it is very, very human. The Keth swarm had consumed 17 civilizations. They moved through the galaxy like a plague of locusts, stripping worlds bare of all resources before moving on to the next target. Their bioships were grown rather than built, massive living vessels that reproduced and evolved with every generation. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They simply fed. When the swarm turned toward the galactic rim, every species in its path prepared to evacuate. The Tellurians abandoned 3 colony worlds. The Minery pulled back to their core systems. Even the proud Vorthok hegemony quietly relocated their border populations. It was the sensible thing to do. The Keth could not be stopped, only avoided. The humans did not evacuate. Captain Christopher Martinez stood on the bridge of the carrier, Defiance, and watched the tactical display update with new contacts. The numbers were staggering. 40,000 Keth bioships had emerged from hyperspace, with more arriving every hour. They filled the screen like drops of blood spreading through water. Combined fleet status, Christopher said quietly. Commander Angela Torres looked up from her console. She was a tall woman with dark skin and eyes that never seemed to miss anything. She had served with Christopher for 8 years, through 3 major engagements and a dozen smaller ones. She had never seen him look worried before. He did not look worried now, but there was something different in his voice. Something heavy. 600 ships total, Angela reported. 300 human vessels. The rest are council species. Callery, Tellurian, Vorthok, and about 50 smaller delegations. How many of them have fought the Keth before? None of them, sir. None of us have. The Keth haven't been in this sector for 2,000 years. Christopher nodded slowly. He looked around the bridge at his crew. Young men and women, most of them, with a few veterans scattered among them. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. "Open a channel to all fleet commanders," he said. The communication system chimed. Christopher took a deep breath. "This is Captain Martinez of the Defiance. In approximately 6 hours, we will engage the Keth swarm. I'm not going to lie to you. The numbers are bad. We are outnumbered 60 to 1. Many of us will not survive this battle." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Some of you are from species that have never fought this kind of enemy. Your instinct will tell you to fall back, to preserve your ships, to wait for a better opportunity. I understand that instinct, but I need you to ignore it. If we fall back, the Keth will sweep through this sector and consume everything in their path. Billions of lives on dozens of worlds. They will not stop. They will not negotiate. They will simply keep eating until there is nothing left. So we are going to stand here, and we are going to fight. Not because we think we can win, but because winning is not the point. The point is to hurt them so badly that they think twice before they come back. The point is to show them that this galaxy has teeth." Christopher looked at Angela. She nodded. "Human ships will take point positions. Council vessels will provide support and covering fire. If your ship is damaged, fall back to the second line. If it's destroyed, we will pick up your survivors and put them on other ships. We will fight until we cannot fight anymore. And then we will keep fighting anyway. Martinez out." The channel closed. Angela stepped closer to him. "Nice speech," she said quietly. "You think they believed it? They don't need to believe it. They just need to follow orders." The Keth arrived 6 hours later, exactly as predicted. The bioships came in waves, massive organic vessels pulsing with terrible life. They did not use traditional weapons. They swarmed their targets, latching onto holes with acidic tendrils. Boring through armor to reach the crew inside, the human ships met them head-on. The Defiance led the charge. Fighters pouring from its launch bays like angry hornets. Pilot Lieutenant Danny Park flew his interceptor into the heart of the swarm, guns blazing. He took down 3 bioships before one caught him with an acid spray that melted his wing. He ejected, was picked up by a rescue shuttle, was back in a new fighter within the hour. This happened again and again across the fleet. Human pilots ejected from dying ships were recovered and immediately returned to combat. Human Marines boarded damaged bioships with flamethrowers and explosives, burning them from the inside. Human engineers jury-rigged, destroyed vessels, getting them running just long enough for one final attack run. The Council species watched in amazement and horror. They had never seen anything like it. When a Kalori ship was critically damaged, its crew evacuated and watched from a safe distance. When a human ship was critically damaged, its crew steered it directly into the enemy. On the third day, the Council fleet began to break. The Tellurians pulled back first, their defensive instincts overwhelming their orders. The smaller delegations followed. Soon, only the human ships and a handful of Kalori vessels remained on the front line. Christopher did not blame them. He understood. But he also did not stop fighting. "Angela," he said on the fifth day, voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Status. We've lost 40% of our ships. The Keth have lost maybe 2,000 bioships. At this rate, we run out of fleet in about 4 more days. And then we start ramming them with whatever's left." Christopher almost laughed. "That's not much of a plan. It's the only plan we have, sir." The battle continued. On the 7th day, Christopher was wounded when a Keth boarding party breached the Defiance. He took an acid burn to his left arm and chest, but he kept commanding from a stretcher until Angela physically carried him to the medical bay. "You're relieved, sir," she told him firmly. "I have the bridge. Angela, I can still fight. You can barely breathe. Rest. That's an order from your acting captain." Christopher wanted to argue, but his body would not cooperate. He fell into an exhausted sleep while doctors worked on his wounds. Angela took command of the fleet. She was not as inspiring as Christopher, but she was just as stubborn. When the Kalori commander suggested a tactical withdrawal, she told him that any ship that retreated would be fired upon by human vessels. "You would shoot your own allies?" the Kalori asked in shock. "I would shoot anyone who runs from this fight," Angela replied coldly. "We did not come here to survive. We came here to win. Stay and fight, or leave and be remembered as cowards. Your choice." The Kalori stayed. On the 9th day, something changed. The Keth swarm began to slow. Their coordinated attacks became scattered. Their bioships started retreating rather than advancing. Angela stared at the tactical display, not quite believing what she was seeing. "What's happening?" She whispered. A communication came through from one of the forward ships. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the Keth. I think it's a surrender signal." Angela sat down heavily in the captain's chair. Around her, the bridge crew was silent, exhausted, barely able to process what they were hearing. "A surrender," she said slowly. "The Keth are surrendering. 3 queens are requesting terms. They say they've never encountered a species that fights like this. They say their swarm has lost too much. They want to negotiate." Angela thought about the last 9 days. The ships they had lost. The friends they had buried. The impossible odds they had faced without flinching. "Tell them I'll receive their queens personally," she said. "And tell them that if they ever come back to this sector, we'll be waiting for them." When Christopher woke up 2 days later, the battle was over. The Keth swarm had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing into deep space. The human fleet had lost 60% of its ships, but they had held every light year of territory. Angela was sitting beside his bed, looking more tired than he had ever seen her. "We won," she said simply. Christopher closed his eyes. "Did we? The Keth are gone. The sector is safe. The Council is calling it the greatest military victory in galactic history. How many did we lose?" Angela was quiet for a moment. "Too many. But not all of us. And the ones who survived will never forget what we did here. Neither will the galaxy." Christopher opened his eyes and looked at her. "You did good, Angela. You held the line. I learned from the best, sir." Outside the medical bay windows, the stars shone cold and bright. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the Keith swarm were running, carrying stories of the species that would not yield. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. 1 year had passed since the Battle of the Rim. The galaxy had changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. Trade routes that once avoided human space now ran directly through it. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers now sent ambassadors to Earth. The Galactic Council, which had demanded human submission, was now requesting human membership on very different terms. The ceremony was held in Geneva, in a great hall that had been built specifically for this moment. The building rose like a crystal flower from the shores of the lake, its walls transparent, its architecture designed to welcome beings of all shapes and sizes. Outside, millions of people gathered to watch on massive screens. Inside, representatives from every council species stood alongside human diplomats and military leaders. High Arbiter Zinthal floated at the center of the hall, ancient crystals glowing with soft light. The being had traveled from the council homeworld specifically for this occasion. A journey of 3 weeks through hostile space. It was a gesture of respect that had never been extended to any other species. Admiral Patricia Cole sat in the front row. Wearing her dress uniform for the first time since the siege of Nexus Station, beside her was Captain Christopher Martinez, still recovering from his wounds but insisting on attending. Angela Torres stood with the honor guard, her new captain's insignia gleaming on her collar. Scattered throughout the audience were the survivors of both battles. Men and women who had refused to yield when yielding seemed like the only option. Daniel Hayes sat near the front as well, alongside Maria Santos. They had been promoted since their first meeting with Ambassador Vexeri. Daniel was now the Secretary General of the United Terran Coalition. Maria was his chief of staff, but they still remembered standing in that chamber on Harmony's edge. Being told to surrender their territory, they still remembered saying no. Zinthal began to speak, and the hall fell silent. Distinguished guests, honored representatives, people of Earth, we gather here today to mark a new chapter in galactic history. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Council has guided civilization among the stars. We have maintained peace. We have facilitated trade. We have protected our members from external threats. The Arbiter paused, crystals flickering with something that might have been emotion. But we have also made mistakes. We have demanded submission from new species in the name of cooperation. We have asked others to yield their sovereignty in the name of integration. We believed this was wisdom. We believed this was the only way. We were wrong. The words echoed through the silent hall. Somewhere in the audience, a Vorthok representative shifted uncomfortably. Humanity has shown us a different path. When we demanded territory, they refused. When we blockaded their station, they held. When the Keth swarm threatened to consume everything in its path, humans stood and fought while others fled. They did not do these things because they were foolish or irrational. They did them because they believed that some things are worth more than survival. Freedom, sovereignty, the right to stand on your own 2 feet and decide your own future. Zinthal turned to face the human delegation directly. We asked ourselves why you would not yield. We studied your history, your psychology, your very brain chemistry, and we discovered something remarkable. You do not yield because yielding goes against everything you are. It is not stubbornness. It is not pride. It is simply your nature. The Galactic Council has survived for millennia by yielding to every threat, compromising with every enemy, sacrificing countless worlds in the name of peace. We have survived, but we have not thrived. We have grown old and comfortable while the universe changed around us. Today, that changes. The Arbiter's crystals flared bright.
Ow.
Today, the Galactic Council formally invites humanity to join as full members. With no demands for territorial concessions, no requirements for submission, no conditions that compromise your sovereignty. You will join us as equals or not at all. Daniel Hayes rose from his seat and walked to the center of the hall. He stood before Zinthal, 2 species facing each other across a gap of 10,000 years of evolution. High Arbiter, Daniel said. Humanity accepts. The hall erupted in applause. Human and alien hands clapped together. Voices from 200 species called out in celebration. For the first time in galactic history, a new member had joined the council without yielding anything at all. The ceremony continued for hours after that. There were speeches and treaties and formal handshakes. Ambassador Vextheri apologized personally to Daniel for their first meeting, and Daniel accepted with genuine warmth. High Marshal Grathkar of the Vorthok, who had lost 11 ships at Nexus Station, approached Patricia Cole and offered a warrior's salute of respect. "You should have surrendered," he told her. "I know," Patricia replied with a smile, "but where's the fun in that?" As evening fell, Daniel found himself standing on a balcony overlooking the celebration below. Maria joined him, handing him a glass of champagne. She said, "We did it. We're officially part of the Galactic Council." Daniel watched a group of Kalori delegates trying to learn a human card game. They kept losing and kept demanding rematches, refusing to accept that the odds were against them. "You know what's funny?" He said they spent centuries building a system based on submission and compromise. They thought it was the only way to survive. And then we showed up and proved them wrong. Are you worried about what happens next? Daniel considered the question. Out there among the stars were threats they had not yet imagined, enemies they had not yet met, challenges that would make the Keth swarm look easy by comparison. "Doe," he said finally. "I'm not worried, because whatever comes next, we'll face it the same way we've faced everything else. We won't back down. We won't give up. We won't yield." Maria raised her glass. To not yielding, Daniel agreed. Below them, the celebration continued. Humans and aliens danced together, laughed together, shared stories of battles won and lessons learned. Somewhere in the crowd, Christopher Martinez was teaching a group of Tellurians how to play poker. Angela Torres was explaining human military tactics to a fascinated audience of Minri scholars. Patricia Cole was arm wrestling a Vorthok warrior and somehow winning. The stars came out, one by one, filling the sky with cold light, the same stars that humans had looked up at for thousands of years, dreaming of the day they would walk among them. That day had come, and they had arrived not as supplicants or servants, but as equals. They had earned their place through blood and sacrifice, and an absolute refusal to bend. High Arbiter Zinthal watched the celebration from a quiet corner of the hall. Scholar Minra stood beside the ancient being, large eyes reflecting the lights. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Minra asked. "Accepting them as equals?" Zinthal was silent for a long moment. The crystals that made up the Arbiter's body pulsed slowly, thoughtfully. "I think," Zinthal said finally, "that we did not have a choice. They were going to be what they are regardless of what we did. The only question was whether they would be our allies or our enemies. And now? Now they are our allies, our partners, our friends, perhaps, in time." The Arbiter's crystals flickered with something that might have been amusement. "And may the universe have mercy on anyone foolish enough to become their enemy." Minra looked out at the celebration, at the humans who laughed and danced and drank without any apparent concern for the weight of history resting on their shoulders. "They are strange creatures," the scholar said softly. Zinthal agreed. "But I think perhaps they are exactly what this galaxy needed. A reminder that survival is not enough. That some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. That sometimes refusing to yield is the bravest thing anyone can do." The night grew late, but the celebration showed no signs of stopping. The stars turned overhead, indifferent to the tiny beings below who had claimed their place among them. And somewhere out in the darkness, in the scattered remnants of broken empires and fleeing swarms, stories were being told. Stories of the species that would not yield. The species that fought when fighting made no sense. The species that had changed the galaxy simply by refusing to bend. Those stories would spread. They would grow. They would become legends, and the humans would keep making them true.